Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Richard, and we are back with a special podcast. We are going to talk about the Ducks trade deadline for pretty much most of the show. That's what we're going to discuss. The last show, we talked about some of the previous games and stuff. We'll touch on a couple of the games in the show, but not too much. And we will really just dive into this. The trade deadline is just a few days away. A lot of questions about what's going to happen, who's going to go where. We're going to talk about the Ducks. We're going to go through the entire lineup by position and give our thoughts on who we think could be traded. And then towards the end, we will talk about maybe some players that the Ducks should try to go after. And we'll also talk about a couple recent trades as well. But, of course, before we get started, Eddie, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a shot. Mike, I've been good. Since our last podcast, I took those shots during the podcast, and then we had the shots at the game, or one shot at the game, which was cool, which is a good win. And then I ended up just having a couple shots on Saturday, and that was it. Been hitting the gym a lot and trying to be a little more healthy or lose some weight. So I've been doing pretty good, but I'm going to have a Pink Whitney shooter. I haven't drank beer, Mike. I haven't drank a beer, I want to say, in like a week and a half. So I'm doing pretty good on that, on those empty calories. But yeah, putting down some sugar of a Pink Whitney shot. So cheers to everyone. I was looking forward to talking this podcast, Mike. We've been talking about the trade deadline for a while. So it's always fun this time of this last week of the month. So we're all looking forward to it. Actually, not the month now. It's earlier now. But it's going to be a fun show. I'm not sure if the Ducks are going to do too much, but we're going to talk about what they can do, and hopefully we're wrong. And you never know. Trade deadline, anything can happen. But Mike, cheers to you on my Pink Whitney. What are you drinking?
I am doing Red Bull vodka this time around, so I'm doing that. And yeah, Eddie's right about the drinking thing. We went to the game against St. Louis, and we had a couple Belvedere shots, and I did have a beer. But yeah, Eddie's been kind of tame. I've been kind of tame too lately. Been trimming down a little bit and whatnot. So we did go to that game. My better half and I went to the Chicago game. So, the Ducks are flirting with the playoffs here. The Vancouver, they're trying to catch up to them, and they're right there. They did take them out in that last game, but they're it's just rough with the Ducks. They had a chance to really take out Chicago. Chicago, as you know, did that trade with Seth Jones, and the Ducks probably should have beat them, but we're down 3-2 in the second period, and then ended up getting blown out at the beginning of the third period. They were down 2-0 to Vancouver when we were at that game, and the Ducks rallied and ended up winning that one. So a lot of good stuff in that game, but not so much in the Chicago game. Just kind of an up and down thing there. As far as the last couple games since we recorded. Also, we recorded our show before that Vancouver game, and I do apologize. The audio was a little bit off. Eddie and I were in person together, and there was kind of some issues with the audio. I do want to give a shout out to our podcast producer, Braden. He really cleaned it up. Apparently, he told me it was very, very poor on the raw audio. But I know some of you reached out to us and said the echoing was a little bit too much at some parts, so I apologize for that. So hopefully this one will be a little bit better. Eddie and I have only recorded in person maybe 2 or 3 times, so we're going to have to try to figure that out in the future. But we did have a good time in that game against Vancouver, and then I did not have such a good time in that game against Chicago. But the Ducks keep hovering 6 to 8 points out of the wild card spot. Which kind of translates into the trade deadline coming up, and what can they do? They have options. Will they do it? Are they going to make a push for the playoffs? You guys are always asking those questions. So, Eddie, I guess what were your thoughts on those last 2 games, and then we'll start diving into the lineup and go through it by position, and we'll obviously talk about some trades throughout the league. I threw out the Seth Jones one in there. It was kind of a big one. And then towards the end, we'll talk about maybe some players the Ducks will go after. I have a monster blockbuster trade that I will throw out at the end that even Eddie does not know about. And you guys will probably call me crazy, but I think if this trade happened, it would be very beneficial to the Ducks, but I'm going to hang on to that. So you're going to have to listen till the end when I throw that out there. And you will call me crazy, and that is fine. I love it. I've been called worse. But with that, Eddie, what did you think about these last two games, implications, kind of overall picture? The Ducks are, hovering around the wild card. A few teams in the way: St. Louis, Calgary, obviously Vancouver. What are your thoughts?
You know what? It was fun to hang out with you, Mike. And like I said, like Mike said, we apologize about the audio. It's actually our second time actually doing it face to face, Mike. So we have to figure that out for next time, and get better audio or do something different. Hope you guys enjoyed it though. I mean, I enjoyed it, looking at you and talking to you face to face, and cheersing a shot with you during the show. So that was cool. That Vancouver game was fun, Mike. It was fun to hang out with you. I haven't hung out with you in a long time. But the whole thing is, I talked about on numerous shows how the Ducks need to capitalize on these teams that are struggling, the teams that are having some issues. Vancouver's been having internal issues going on with JT Miller before they traded him and Elias Pettersson. Pettersson has like 3 points since the trade of JT Miller, and JT Miller's exploded with 12 points. It's just insane how the drama is just affecting their locker room. It goes to say that maybe Elias Pettersson is the issue in that locker room, or maybe the drama was just too much for the whole locker room to recover from. But I'm glad the Ducks went ahead and they gave it their all. Yeah, I get it that Vancouver was probably tired a little bit from going into overtime against the Kings. But no excuse. Usually we've seen this before. The Ducks would go in and do that and kind of just drop the game. Ducks went down 2-0 real quick, and we both thought it was going to be over. Like, okay, this is going to be it. Vancouver might do a reverse back in the day where the Ducks beat them 9-1, and they might get their revenge again. But no, the Ducks came back. They were resilient. They didn't put their heads down or mope. They came down and they took advantage of a depleted team. I want to say mentally depleted team, and they took the win. It was fun game. Everything you needed in a game. We got free chicken. The chant was going on that we want chicken, and it was cool. And the person that's sitting next to us, the Kings fan, was probably all pouty and mad. But oh well, she could just go on her merry way. But yeah, I think this game was really good. It started off slow, but the right people stepped up at the right time, and everything was good. There was a good amount of physicality in there as well, which I like to see. There was a few scrums that they're just kind of face washing each other and talking. Like, just drop the gloves and go. Just drop them and go. But I think my player of the game probably would have been, and he was the first star of the game, Ryan Strome. He just stepped up to a whole new level in that game. Probably one of the best games I've seen him this season play. And the unselfish act that he went ahead and made that pass on the empty net, I think that was really cool. So, overall, Mike, I think it was a good game. A little slow start, and it got us worried a little bit. I was about to just break my diet stuff and just get drunk with you if 2 more goals were scored, Mike. I think I told you that. But, yeah, overall, I think this was a good game against Vancouver.
Yeah, you're right. They started out slow, and then they turned it around. They got goals from all kinds of different players, which is what the Ducks need to do, to keep going forward here and progressing. Part of the problem, too, has been the penalty kill and special teams has been very, very rough in these games. The Ducks have had a hard time. They've given up, 4 power plays on a couple of these different games since the break of the Four Nations, which has not been good. And then on the power play, they've only been like 2 of 10 leading up to this game against Edmonton. We're recording before the Edmonton-Vancouver games that are coming up, but the Ducks have had a rough time with the special teams. It's been a big problem. The penalty kill was really good before the Four Nations, but now it's been rough. They've I'm looking at it here. They've been shorthanded 17 times in those 5 games since the Four Nation, and they gave up 6 power play goals. That's just 64% efficiency in killing off penalties, and then just hanging around 20% on the power play. But they've only had 10 power plays, so that has not helped. And then in Chicago too as well. They had a chance to still win that game. They were down 3-2. A lot of high stick calls that were missed. You had Killorn that was high sticked. You had Cutter and Terry as well. I posted some of those photos of them having stitches. Just a poorly officiated game. Not to excuse how the Ducks played in that game against Chicago. They needed to play much better. They did not play as well, especially in the third period. The first 10 minutes there, I was super frustrated. We were sitting there watching, and the Ducks were down 3-2, and then it was 4-2, 5-2, 6-2, and it was just come on, guys. I thought they played okay in the first two periods, but then in the third they had a meltdown, and even with some of the calls going against them, but that's now been a problem for them again. The special teams on both sides has not worked well since the Four Nations, so that's something that they'll have to look at. Obviously, they did not have Trevor Zegras. For the 3-game suspension. The Ducks won 1 out of 3 of those games. But, the Ducks have won more games than lost games when Zegras is in the lineup. So, he's been an important part of the team. Obviously, he's going to be back against Edmonton and Vancouver leading up to the trade deadline. Of course, we will talk about that and him as well. But, I was disappointed that, Gibson also came back too as well in that game against Chicago. Dansk got sent back down to the HL. They honored Gibson. He had already played his 500th game as Anaheim Duck, but they had honored him that night. And then, it just was not a good night. Especially the second half of the game, the Ducks did not play well. Kind of disappointing for a night when you're honoring your goalie. And, of course, his name is out there, too, and we'll discuss him. I know some of you are sick of hearing Gibson and Zegras, but we're going to talk a little bit about them and some things with some of the other players that are coming up. But that's kind of what I look at where the Ducks are at right now. They're still on the edge. They could try to get there and make it, but I feel like they had a rough time. Obviously, Zegras not being in the lineup didn't help on the power play, and them going 1-2-0 in those 3 games. So getting him back will be good, but it's been a little bit of a rough spill a little bit in these last couple games. Also, that Buffalo game, we did talk about that in the last podcast as well. Another one where they were lucky to be ahead, and then they had a complete meltdown in the third period. So you had 2 third periods that did not go well against Buffalo and Chicago, Eddie.
Yeah, that Buffalo, let's not talk about. Chicago was even worse, Mike. Chicago was bad. It's just, I was in the gym at that time on Saturday watching that game from my phone, and thank God no one was in there. It was empty, so it was perfect because I was screaming and I was, it motivated me because I was getting pissed off, so I was lifting harder. So that was the only positive thing about that. But I want to just touch on before the game, there was a big blockbuster trade regarding Chicago. Seth Jones, who went 4th overall, went to Nashville. I remember that draft year. He was supposed to be projected to go 1st overall to the Colorado Avalanche. And there was a big old thing where he was trained by Joe Sakic and taught kind of the basics because Joe Sakic knew his dad. His dad played for the Denver Nuggets and they were close. So he kind of helped his son, Seth Jones, get into it. So everyone thought, okay, well, the Avalanche need defense. This is a 1st overall potential pick. But then they went ahead and picked someone that no one really discussed or knew about, Nathan MacKinnon. And look how it turned out. So that's a little bit of history on him. But I guess he was still frustrated enough that he went out to the media saying that, this team hasn't changed from day one and he wants to kind of get out of there. And I think a player, especially kind of a veteran player like him, to go out there and say that to the media, it's not kind of his character. You don't really hear him bad-mouthing the team or bad-mouthing anyone else. So I think it was kind of like an agent approach. They probably talked to the team. The team wasn't willing to part ways with them, didn't want to do anything. So his last resort was to request a trade and say that. And rumors were that he only would accept the trade to Dallas and to Florida. So he kind of limited the options. Dallas was kind of harder, the hurdles to get over it. Right now, Florida's dealing with the Matthew Tkachuk injury, and he's on long-term injury reserve. So it frees up a little bit of money for them. They have a little more cap space to play with. But the trade was Chicago got their backup, technically their backup goalie, which could be a starter, and Spencer Knight, and a 1st-round pick in 2026. Florida got Seth Jones and a 4th round. Chicago did retain some salary, about approximately $2 million, so they got Seth Jones. His $9.5 million contract goes down to about 7.5, which is not bad for Florida. And I guess the era of Seth Jones, and we thought that, I personally thought that when the Ducks played Chicago, it was going to be a little downfall, losing their number 1 defenseman. But no, Chicago came into play for some reason, or the Ducks just played that horribly. And that brings me to believe that people talk about playoffs and Ducks are going to they're 6 points away, they're 8 points away, there's a chance. But you know what? There's not a chance. If you lose games like this and get embarrassed by Chicago, that should speak volumes right there. Yeah, I know every team has their bad times, but Ducks still need a lot of work. Like, if Ducks were really serious about making the playoffs, every single player should have just turned it up a little bit. They should have been playoff mode already. They should have finished the checks. They should have went over there and did what they need to do and play that playoff style of hockey, which you didn't see in that game. Yes, I know the high stick calls. Chicago's favorite. We everyone knows that in the league. I think all 31 teams in the league right now know that Chicago's probably one of the favorites. And then NHL, you're not going to get those calls. But the Ducks shouldn't have let that just dictate the whole game, and they did. Chicago owned it. It was just crazy to see. It was crazy to see that they threw that A on Bedard, too. That was kind of weird. Bedard, and I know he's this generational franchise player, but all I've been seeing from him is pouting and bitching and crying and rolling his eyes and sitting there and talking to the media how he's tired of losing and all this stuff. Instead of being a leader, that A, it just seems like it's just, for asshole or ass clown? I don't know. Maybe he should call his dad Perry and instill some manners in that guy and know how to be a leader. But I think that was the wrong move from Chicago. And I think Seth Jones, in the long run, he's going to do really well in Florida. But, Mike, this was brutal to watch. And this borderline pissed me off on Saturday, seeing them get destroyed. Even though Chicago did beat the Kings when the Kings went over there in Chicago and played them. But Kings have a horrible, I guess, not horrible, but they've been horrible on the road. But I don't know. This was just a bad game, and it just kind of just proves that the Ducks aren't ready to even be in a wild card spot. And I'd rather just maintain a spot, being in the bottom 10 to get that one more year of that top 10 draft pick. And next year we can just decide what we want to do and try to really go for it. I mean, if Ducks would have won this game, Mike, they would have been tied for last season's win record. They had, 27 wins total last season? They have 26 right now. If they would have beat Chicago, they would have had that 27th win. So, I mean, the team is getting better on paper, but if you really deep down and look at it, with their special teams and everything else, they're not. And I think the Ducks have to work on that. And I know a lot of people want to see playoffs. Mike, I was talking to you when we were driving back to your house, so I wouldn't mind the Ducks being playoffs if we could watch some more hockey and get the experience. But then again, on the flip side, I'd rather get that top 10 pick and not get mopped in the first round.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, do you want to make the playoffs and then barely make it and then get smoked? And that's what I think the Ducks need to try to figure out here is what are they going to do at the trade deadline? Do they feel like they're a contending team, or do they feel like they're barely going to make it? I mean, that's the thing here. And that's what kind of leads to, what are they going to do at the trade deadline? Are they going to go big, or are they going to go and not do much? I mean, I don't know. What's the plan with this team going forward? And that's where we got to break down, hey, are they going to try to make a big move? Because that's what Elliot Friedman hinted at. He's like, hey, they're going to try to make a big move if it's available. Well, is it available or not? I mean, I don't know. Is it? I mean, that's the issue. So I don't see it kind of happening. We'll dive into it and see what's going to happen with this team. We'll go down the line here positionally and kind of talk by each spot and see what's going to happen. Just starting off with the goalies, I think the biggest thing is we know that Dostal is going to be a future. We know that he's not going anywhere. The question is what will the Ducks do with Gibson? And there's a lot of stuff here to look at. Gibson didn't play well in that game against Chicago. He'd been hurt. He came back. The Ducks got Husso. We talked about that in the last podcast. And they picked him up. So you have Dansk and Husso, down in the AHL. So what's the plan? Pierre LeBrun says that, Gibson is willing to go to Edmonton. But I don't know if he wants to go there. He wants to go to a team where he can play and be a contender. And also be the number one guy. You got, Pickard down there in the mix and whatnot. So I don't know if that's the deal there, when they're kind of splitting between their goalies, if he's going to be the guy there. We've had Carolina been mentioned. I've heard some people talk about Columbus. as maybe be another option there in the mix. So there's a lot of stuff, in goal. I think if the Ducks are going to trade Gibson, another thing you got to figure out is Dansk and Husko ready to be backups to Dostal or not? Or are you going to trade Gibson and try and get a goalie in return? I think those are some of the questions in net that Verbeek has to look at. If he doesn't think Dansk and Huso can be the backups, then you try to trade Gibson, but then you got to get a goalie back. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know. I don't know what he feels. I mean, Huso has looked good. He's only had limited action with the goals, obviously, but where are we going to go with that? So there's a lot of question marks. It seems like people think Gibson's going to go this time around the trade deadline, but I'm not too sure, Eddie. I don't know. I mean, it seems like this has been, it's like Christmas every year, the trade deadline. It comes around, but I don't know if you're going to actually get a present of Gibson being traded or him staying on the team, however you look at it.
No, I you know what? I don't think he's going anywhere this trade deadline. It's just too limited now. Like, you have Carolina, which he mentioned he wanted to go to. And like you said, Mike, he wants to be a bona fide starter. He wants that to be his net. You have to kind of earn it. With Edmonton, you have Stuart Skinner who's playing really well. He played well in the playoffs last season. The season before, he kind of shot the bed. But who knows what's going to happen this season? I know Edmonton does need like that true number one elite goalie. I want to say Stuart Skinner's more of a fringe starting goalie. I don't think he's elite. I think if any trade with Edmonton, it would have Picard coming back our way. He can back up Dostal. But then again, Verbeek has this whole like hierarchy of what he wants for Gibson. It's like he's drawing this line in the sand. He's drawing a big line right now in the sand. However, Verbeek right now is Aquaman, and he's drawing that line where the Titanic sank. And unless these other GMs have fins and snorkels or scuba diving gear, they can't even get close to even getting to that line. Like, come on, you have to kind of budge a little bit. Gibson has health issues. He's been hurt how many times this season? He just recently came off an injury. I know his stats don't reflect how good he is because the team in front of him is horrible. But then again, the health injury thing. With Edmonton, are you willing to gamble on a contract like that? Yeah, even the Ducks can retain a certain amount of salary, but are you really to gamble that on someone that just might get hurt in the playoffs, and then you're kind of stuck just in the same place you were with Stuart Skinner, but you gave up assets, you gave up prospects, you gave up draft picks? No, it doesn't make any sense. The whole Carolina thing, I think right now they're out of their mind right now with the whole Mikko Rantanen situation. He hasn't told them if he wants to re-sign. They offered him a contract already. But it doesn't seem right now that he's going to re-sign there. So there's no point for Carolina to make any move. And I think they're pretty comfortable with Coach and Freddie Anderson as their 1-2 punch going into the playoffs. I think their biggest concern right now is trying to figure out what Mikko Rantanen's going to do. Do you want to just lose another kind of star player like you did in Jake Gensel last season when you traded for him? And he ended up walking in free agency and went to Tampa Bay? No, something has to do because those kind of moves right there can get a GM fired. So I think right now there's not really a market for Gibson, especially the price that Verbeek wants. You have, like I mentioned before, Chicago made a trade and got Spencer Knight. He had a 41 save win, 1 goal allowed against the Kings in his debut with Chicago. I think he's their goalie of the future. And like I said, I'm bringing him up because they have Peter Mrazek, who hasn't played bad on a shitty Chicago team. He's been playing really well. I think he can jump in and be a solid 1A, 1B, or 1A, 2A, whatever you call it, punch on any team. He's available. You have Vanacek from San Jose. He's another goalie that's played well. He played well in New Jersey. Look what happened with Mackenzie Blackwood when San Jose traded him to the Colorado Avalanche. He's playing lights out. He's their number one. Got an extension for 5 years. I think the same thing with Vanacek. He can go somewhere and kind of be that that goalie that can steal games and make those wins. Another name too that's been thrown out there is Calgary. Valdor. They have Dustin Wolf or Dylan Wolf. I'm sorry, I probably got his name wrong. I should have wrote his first name down. But Wolf is probably their goalie of the future, and he's playing well. Calgary doesn't need those 2 goalies. Val is a UFA after this season. I don't think he's going to re-sign with Calgary just to kind of be behind Wolf, but who knows? So there's more options now for goaltending. I think the Ducks made a mistake 3 years ago. I want to say, Mike, when Gibson was hot, he was actually keeping the Ducks and carrying them into a playoff contention, and they could have got. And there was times where people were talking about when Edmonton needed a goalie at that time too, Draisaitl when his contract was almost coming up, that it could have been a Draisaitl Gibson kind of thing. That was how elite level Gibson was. That it was a kind of a conversation that Draisaitl could have been in the mix of a Gibson Draisaitl flip because the Edmonton Oilers and their fans were worried about him not re-signing long term with Edmonton Oilers. I mean, obviously that would have been blessing for the Ducks if they're getting someone like Draisaitl, but now I think I think his value kind of dropped. I think Verbeek is still holding on to this kind of this mirage of a value, and he's not allowing other teams to get in there. I'm glad he's sticking to his guns, and he's not just bowing down and taking like whatever he can get, the crumbs for Gibson. He doesn't need to trade him right now. It's not something where you need to trade. The Ducks are kind of just on that little line right now and shaky thing, but still, it's just you have to give some teams some options and not just allow them to come in and make phone calls and ask for the world. You can't be asking for a Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews for Gibson right now. He's not worth that value, especially with his health-wise. So you have to draw a line. You have to make a decision. We have Doss coming up as an RFA. Do you think he wants to sign long-term if he's going to be behind Gibson's shadow for the next 2 years? I don't think so. I don't think any goalie wants to do that. I think he's proved well enough that he can handle the starting position. And like you said, Mike, he's a goalie of the future.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so the question with Gibson is, do you just wait with him till, I guess his contract expires or what? Like, what do you do with him? And I'm with you. I don't think Dostal wants to hang out and be back there. And he's not. He's been the starting goalie, for I would say this season, even with Gibson being hurt and stuff. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do. If they're going to hang out and then, try to do something with him or not. I mean, some of these other teams out there, like you mentioned, Edmonton, I don't know if Edmonton is a fit. I mean, are we going to get one of those other goalies back in return? You mentioned Anderson and Carolina. So, I don't really see him going anywhere because I know Verbeek has a high ceiling for him too as far as a return. So I just don't know. It's one that obviously comes up again and again and again, but we also talked about in the last show how Cronin kind of leaked out after that game that Gibson was hurt that hey, he has this reoccurring upper body injury, and we all know that he's kind of had this on and off groin injury, but as we've talked about in the show before, teams talk about upper body injuries and lower body injuries, and it might not necessarily be where you think it is, right? Or if it's in the midsection, like what is it, upper body, lower body, right? They kind of play with that. So it just doesn't help his trade value. You had him, 2-3 times he hasn't been able to finish games this season. And then he kind of, the Ducks overall laid an egg, against Chicago, but Gibson didn't play that well in that game too. So, what's the deal here? I just don't know. Like they're all saying that they think he's more likely to be traded right now, but I don't see it. I just don't. I think that Verbeek has too much that he wants to ask for. I had someone talk to me that's close to the team said that, those articles in The Athletic that we talked about, that Verbeek is a kind of hard-nosed and he kind of sticks to what he wants to do. So I think the Ducks should trade him. You and I talked about, trying to trade him the last couple of seasons. I think it is time to make a move, but I don't know. I think with the circumstances right now, I just wouldn't be surprised if Gibson is not traded at least by the deadline.
No, I agree, Mike. I agree. And like right now, there's not that big of a market for him. I mean, if Verbeek lowered his price significantly, I get it. But right now, it's just the market died down, and there's other options that can kind of just wait and see and test. I mean, maybe if the Oilers get bounced in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and Stuart Skinner just lays an egg, Pickard, isn't the backup that everyone thought he was going to be, then maybe they revisit this conversation come the draft. But as of right now, I don't see Gibson moving at all. I think he's going to stay with the Ducks. And you know what? My issue, too, is nothing against Gibson. I think he's been a fantastic goalie. I think on the right team, if he does get traded by next season, I think he has a chance of making the Olympics, getting to that form. Obviously, he's not. I don't think he's going to be a starter, but I think he can be in the mix to be on Team USA when they go to over there in Italy next year. But I don't know what the whole infatuation of them holding on to him so long. Do you really? And then you mentioned too, Mike. Like, are they going to hold on to him until his contract expires? What's the point of that? Like, we have a goalie that's ready. We have a goalie that can benefit from being that full-time starter. Let him just. I think he's proven enough that he can. Like, Gibson's numbers and Doss's numbers are pretty much the same. With Gibson a slightly better edge by 10% on the same, or 0.10% on the save percentage. So I think I just don't know. I don't understand this team going back with Bob Murray. Like, I don't understand why they're so keen on holding on to Gibson during this whole rebuild. They could have got the world for him, Mike. Like, I think one of the GMs would have traded their left nut at one point to get Gibson, but now it's just the more and more he progresses, he gets older, and the injuries, and then Cronin mentioning the injury stuff, the lingering injury. It's just that just kind of sucks the value out of him, and it's just the more and more you wait, the more it's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? I know he has that term left, and I know a lot of teams are afraid of that because of their cap. But the Ducks only have one retained salary, which is Cam Fowler. They have two more spots where they can retain it. If they don't want to hold on to that spot forever, they can make a three-way deal, which has been popular in the last 2 or 3 seasons with teams doing those 3 ways for other teams to retain salaries. But, yeah, it's just I want Gibson to be traded. I want him to be gone by Friday. Not because I hate Gibson, but I want him to have a chance to go out there and win a Stanley Cup and play some competitive hockey and show the world what he can do and what he's capable of. And I want to see the return we get and hopefully get a good return and then give Doss that kind of peace of mind like, hey, you're a goalie for the future. Come contract time, you're it. Like, you can sign a long term. Obviously not that longer term. Like, we have to wait and see what more he can do, but I think something has to happen. It should have happened, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I wouldn't hold my breath on it.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. That's where I'm at. And the question is for Verbeek, just to close this part out, and we'll switch over to the defense, is Dansk or Husso you're going to be your backup if you trade Gibson? And if he's not okay with that, then I don't see him going anywhere unless some kind of goalie is part of the mix back. So, yeah, I think we're going to be kind of sitting here with Gibson and Dostal at least till the offseason. I just don't see it happening. So
yes, same here. You know what? I would leave Husso at San Diego. I think he's playing well. He played well with Grand Rapids. If anything, if you don't get a goalie back, you just have Dance come out and be the backup because Dulce is going to take most of the starts. So, but
yeah, and the other part of that too is you have Klang who's out month to month. They don't know when he's going to come back. So maybe you wait till the summer and see how Klang's doing, and then kind of reevaluate from there. I mean, maybe that's the situation that the Ducks go with the goalie spot, and then that's just kind of where we're at. I do want to mention that we are part of the Old City Sports Network. Check out all the discounts in the description box. OCSN is the discount code for most of those down there, but go in there and look. We have all kinds of sponsors in there and get anywhere from like 15-20% off at a lot of them. So check them out. Old City Sports Network. Okay,
hey, Mike.
With that, yeah.
One more thing about goalies, if I can just interrupt you real quick. I posted yesterday about one of my hockey buddies that passed away. Steve Grimm.
Yes.
Yeah, this guy. I just want to give him a shout out. He was a goalie. I just want to say that hockey just brings us together, and I've never would have met him or anyone else I met without hockey. And this guy, I just want to talk about real quick because he was a goalie. He played until he was 70 years old, Mike. 70 years old, he's playing goalie. The picture I shared, like
crazy.
And he loved the game. He loved us. I mean, we drove him nuts. He hated the social media, taking pictures, the videos, and how we were in the locker room. But he loved all of us, and he gave more than he wanted, and he gave more to the sport of hockey than anyone could have. Like I've never met anyone that loved the game so much. So I do want to give a shout out to him. Rest in peace. He lived a great life. He was a really great man with integrity. A great Christian man too, so I know he's up there in heaven looking down and playing hockey with all the greats that passed away too. So I want to go ahead and give a shout out and kind of dedicate that portion of goalies to him and his honor. And just I'm grateful to have been his friend, been his teammate, and like I said, hockey. I'm grateful for hockey for allowing me to introduce someone or to meet someone like that. And I just wish his family the best, and I wish that their healing goes well. And till I see you again, brother.
Yeah, man, that's like Gordie Howe-esque. You know,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
you're playing that long. I mean, and goalie's a rough spot, man. I mean, hockey in general is a rough, sport. We've always talked about that. It's tough no matter what position you play. But you play goalie, man. You're in that net. You're not playing every game, but when you're playing, you're out there the full 60 minutes. Unless you're getting pulled because you're trying to get a goal at the end or something like that, or you have a really bad night or something. But it's a rough spot for him to do that and go that far. That is amazing. So I wish him and his family the best. With that, yeah. So we talked about all the goalies. The next big question is defense. And, of course, Dumoulin's name has come up a lot. We had Eric Stevens talk to Dumoulin, said Dumoulin wants to stay in Anaheim. So there's part of that. You have the issue with rotating Hellison, Minchikov, and Zellweger. What do you do? How do you figure that out? What do you look at? He's been mentioned by so many people. Dumoulin, that is, by Pierre and Friedman and all these other people talk about extension or trade. So you look at the Ducks blue line. You're pretty sure that Trouba and Gudas aren't going to go anywhere. And then you look at Lacombe, who has just been outstanding this season. He scored 11 goals, which no one has done that on defense since Hampus Lindholm was with the Ducks, which is amazing. So he's in there. So what do you do, right? You try to clear up a spot and trade Dumoulin. Eddie and I have talked about trying to send Hellison, Minty, or Zelli down to the AHL. It doesn't seem like Verbeek wants to do that. Elliot Freeman also talked about Verbeek and how he's not super concerned with Dumoulin being in there. So this is another situation where they don't trade him and nothing happens, which I think would be a travesty. I think if there's any move to be made this trade deadline, if the Ducks were to make one move and no other moves, Dumoulin to me would be the guy that they should trade. But if they don't, I kind of throw this out there, and it's kind of a weird thing, but if you're not willing to send Hellison, Minty, or Zelli to the AHL, then do you try to trade one of those guys if you're going to keep Dumoulin and sign him to an extension? I don't agree with that, but I throw that out there because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, and kind of wanted to get your thoughts, Eddie. If the Ducks do keep Dumoulin, do sign him to an extension, what do you do with Hellison, Minty, and Zellweger?
Oh, wow. You're going to get a lot of people pissed off. I think people are still pissed off about them trading Drysdale. That's a lot to take in, Mike. I don't know. Dumoulin, I think he should go. UFA. I'm saying this not because he played bad. I think he's played well. I think everything you expect from a defensive defenseman, kind of a two-way defenseman too, he provided. He's not flashy. He's not throwing up those numbers, but you can trust him on the back end. You can trust him to be there. You don't have to worry about him. I think that there's going to be teams calling about him that can use that kind of depth defenseman, that bottom six pairing, and someone that they can trust, a veteran defenseman like that. I don't understand why they would re-sign him to an extension. We have our three young guys that need that playing time. And I think Verbeek is crazy. I think Cronin's crazy for this whole rotating thing. I think it's the dumbest thing you can do. I'm pretty sure a lot of you agree with me. You can't just keep rotating these guys in and out of the lineup. It's not good for their development, okay? You play one game, you're filling it. Before you even start getting your groove, guess what? You're scratched. You're in the in the press box just watching it from above. It makes zero sense. I think the way they're mismanaging these defensemen, you know what? At this point, I would say trade them all. Let them go somewhere else and play. That's how irritated I am. But no, I think these players are our future, and we've seen a lot of potential from all three of them. Minty has been on top of my list for a while. I think once you see him in more games and let him get his groove and his rhythm, he looks comfortable. Like his first season, he looked like a seasoned vet at times. Azali he's just getting started. There's so much offensive potential with him, but like I said, he's not playing enough. These players, they're not finding that rhythm. They're not finding the groove. You're in there 1, 2, 3, 4 games, and boom, you're out. It's like right when you're trying to catch fire, you're catching your groove, you're just done. It's like, okay, well, what next? There's a lot of teams that want Drew Mullen's his services. I mean, obviously, we could say Toronto. Toronto's always in the market for depth defensemen. And you know what? Toronto, Mike, every single day, every player could be linked to Toronto. That's just how they are over there. You can have LeBron James rumored to be linked to Toronto. And that's just how they work over there with the Maple Leafs. But I know Edmonton's probably looking for someone like him, a depth defenseman. I know Dallas still isn't done. They want to bring in someone else that can help them, a 6th or 7th defenseman, especially with Heiskanen still out on injury. Boston too. I know Boston losing their star defenseman, McAvoy. When he got hurt in the Four Nations tournament, they're looking to fill that left side with someone that play that defensive role and that responsibility. And there's a lot of issues going on and rumors going on with Boston. They lost their last 5 games. But with Boston being Boston, they're still on the cusp of getting into that playoff spot and doing something. So I think Boston will be active. I know we heard Marchand's name has been in the rumor mill. He's a UFA this season, even though he stated that he wants to retire a Bruin. But if the Boston Bruins can't get it together, maybe it's time to let him go, trade him for some assets, and he can come and re-sign in the offseason. And I'm bringing Marchand on too because his salary, a lot of teams can't afford to take on this whole thing, but the Ducks can. The Ducks can do a 3-way trade, get some assets from Boston or the other team that's going to make that trade, eat some salary up for just this season, and let Marchand go to a different team and be to a playoff contender. I mean, obviously, we would send Drumlin over there. He can sign an extension, and they can have their little depth defenseman that Boston probably wants. And I think he would fit Boston's mold as a player, too, going over there. And I mentioned, too, last podcast, Morgan Geekie. I like him. I like him as a third-line, bottom-pairing center. Big guy, 6'3", about 200 and something pounds. A little bit under 50% on the face-off, but he's physical. Most of his points scored this season, the 26 out of the 32 he scored, were on 5-on-5. But I think someone like that can really help the bottom 6 and bring some more grit to the Ducks. Something like that for him could do. But, Mike, you're out of your mind right now. I don't know if those if your vodka Red Bull was spiked with something, but trading Hallison, Minty, and Zellweger, that's a stretch, and you're probably going to get a lot of people upset about that.
Yeah, I don't agree with it. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just curious because it doesn't seem like that's come up yet. But
good job on that. Good job. You're the first one to bring that up because I haven't heard anyone even mention any of those 3 names in the trade block or even hinting if they should go that route. So good job on thinking outside the box.
I'm just thinking if Dumoulin really wants to stay, which has been some of the reports out there, and the Ducks do want to sign him to an extension, I mean, you got to figure out something with Helleson, Minchikov, and Zellweger. It doesn't sound like Verbeek wants to send any of them to the AHL, and you keep seeing either Minty or Zellweger getting scratched a lot more, I think, than Helleson. So, I mean, something has to give here. I mean, are you going to send someone down to the AHL? Are you going to trade someone? That's why I'm kind of curious to see what happens with these 4 players. I feel like somebody out of this group's got to be traded. My preference would be to trade Dumoulin and let those other 3 guys do their thing. That's my preference. I'm just saying, if one of those 3 gets traded and Dumoulin gets an extension, like, that would be pretty crazy. But I mean, maybe it's not out of the realm. I don't know. Call me crazy, but I'm just trying to think of the other situation. If they say, "Oh, we're signing Dumoulin to extension in the next few days," then okay, so are they going to trade one of these younger guys? And I'm with you. I don't want to see that. We've already seen these problems with the Ducks. We've seen Lindholm get traded. We've seen Montour get traded. We saw Theodore in the stupid expansion draft crap with him. I don't want that. I'd rather keep the 3 younger guys. I'm just throwing it out there as an option because I'm thinking, well, if Verbeek is going to keep Dumoulin, then what are you going to do? And so far, he hasn't sent any of them, the other 3 young guys, to the AHL. So, yeah, it's a weird situation. That if they did trade one of those 3, I don't think it's the right answer. But I'm not ruling it out 100%. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind with the blue line, Eddie.
Yeah. Okay. So I do want to touch on Trouba and Gudas, but before I do that, Mike Verbeek, I want to ask you, if you had to trade someone right now, out of those three young defensemen, who would it be?
See, for me, I think it would be Hellison. I think Minchikov and Zellweger are the better, two out of those three to me, because I do like Hellison. I think he has a decent game, but with Minchikov and Zellweger, they offer more of a two-way game, and that's what I would want. If you already got Gudis and Truba, who are stay-at-home defensemen, and you've got that. You've got Lacombe, who's killing it, but that's what I would go with. I would go with Minty and Zellweger. I would keep those two guys. If we had to pick between one of those three, Hellison's the odd man out.
Yep, yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with you, and I like his game too. But I wish Zally would, instead of kind of doing that two-way, I wish they would let him kind of flourish more offensively, because that was his game when he came. He was more of that offensive defenseman. Kind of a similar, not similar, but kind of I want to say a similar play style to prime Tyson Berry, if I could say that. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's just weird how they have these three just stuck right there and not doing anything. But yeah, Hellison would be mine. And I do want to mention too, Mike, about Trouba and Gudis. I know you mentioned that they won't be traded, and chances are, I want to say 98.9% they aren't going to be traded. But I can't see teams not calling about them. Like Gudis, I don't think he's been the same player since he got the C. And I was critical on him last podcast. And what did he do? He played a pretty decent game, physical game. When we went to Vancouver, go figure, every time we say something bad about the players or the team, they actually step up and do something. But I don't know. If I'm Verbeek, I'm taking every call on everybody. I mean, with the exception of the few players. Lacombe is... If they trade Lacombe, you're going to get a hell of a return. You're going to get a firstborn for him right now, the way he's playing. He stepped up, and that's the whole point, too, of Lacombe, Mike. You trade Dumoulin, you're forcing these players to play each and every game, and one of them's going to step up. One of them's going to take advantage of that opportunity and really prove to the Ducks that they don't want to be that odd man out next season, and they can handle that responsibility. Lacombe stepped up. I didn't think Lacombe was going to have that step up this season. I don't think any of us thought that Lacombe would have been playing the way he's been playing. He's been the best defenseman for the last couple seasons. This season, the way he's played, he's been better than the defenseman's last season. But yeah, if I'm teams and the Ducks can do this, I would be calling for Trouba and Gudis too. Those two players, you would die to have in the playoffs. They're playoff performers. Gudis knows how it is and knows what it takes to win. And he has that physicality. And both of those players will step it up and ramp it up in the playoffs, physicality-wise, and they'll make a living hell for the other forwards. Chances are, like you said, Mike, they won't be traded, but there's a possibility. I always mention, and I know it's an old cliche, but Gretzky got traded. Look at Mikko Rantanen. No one saw that in the win. There was no analyst talking about possibly getting traded maybe before the deadline, and all of a sudden, Colorado just drops the ball one Friday night like, hey, guess what? This dude's traded. Anything can happen. You just send an email, text the other GMs, call them, however they do it now. Anything can happen for the right price and the right players. I know Verbeek has a list of players that he wants on his team, like you and I and every other fan has a list of fantasy players we want on the Ducks. I know Verbeek has a list in his head, and his team has that list. All it takes is for a team to call up, hey, we have this player available. We want this retained salary, and boom. And I know it's hard because he's wearing the C, this first year of the C, but that doesn't matter. Look at Martin St. Louis. Look at Ryan McDonough before. The captain's been traded. It's not uncommon for that to happen. It just, if the right opportunity and right price comes in, so be it.
Yeah, and that leads into the forward segment because of Zegras, right? That's the other one that's been thrown out there, and some of you hate hearing that. And as Eddie talks about, hey, Wayne Gretzky was traded. Hey, guess what? Teemu Selanne was traded a few times too. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm. Obviously, a lot of people think he won't be moved. You look at the Ducks offensively, and it's kind of a mixed bag about like what would you do on that team. I think some of these guys like Leo Carlson, Cutter Gauthier, Mason McTavish, these are kind of the guys that I don't think would be traded. I don't think would go anywhere, but these are other guys too. Like you mentioned, Trouba and Gudis. Would they get calls on them? Yeah, I think they'd get calls on Carlson, Gauthier, and McTavish too. Not saying I want those guys to be traded, but Those are ones that are out there. You have Lundestrom too, who's really good defensively. I don't see him getting moved. Troy Terry obviously signed his massive extension deal. You had for Toronto signed his deal as well. I don't see those guys going. Zegras is a big question mark. Some people think that maybe he could be traded. A lot of people don't think it's going to happen. But does he fit in that style of game? Cronin gave him recent praise, so where would he go? That's kind of the thing to think about with the forwards. I don't see a lot of action on the forwards, unfortunately. Some of the players that Eddie and I talked about before that the Ducks should consider trading, they won't be able to, because you have Fabry, who is one we talked about returning or trying to trade, but he's on the IR. He's kind of been injury prone, so I don't know what's going to happen with him. We've talked about Killorn. Killorn's got a no trade clause this season, a full one, then modified next season, so I don't see him going anywhere. Strome is another name that's been thrown out there. Maybe Strome is one that gets moved. There's players teams that are looking for players at center. So maybe that I could see maybe Strome getting moved, but I just don't see a lot in terms of the forwards. I like I said, we talked about the goalies. The Ducks definitely have some decisions to make with Gibson and Dumoulin. They could try and figure that out. In terms of the forwards, though, I don't see a whole lot, Eddie. I mean, unless they are willing to pull the trigger on Zegras, I think the only one that maybe goes is Strome, if any of the forwards.
Yeah, I think it's too soon for Zegras. His ceiling is still high. I mean, I know the injuries and his performance hasn't been up to par, so his value is a little lower, but he still has a high ceiling. Do you really want to trade Zegras right now and then him be a franchise superstar player, and then you're just kicking yourself in the ass and you're a laughingstock of being one of those teams that traded and made the worst trade in franchise history or NHL history? No, just hold on to him, let him get his game back. He's been playing well, and he's been better on both ends of the ice, not just those creative plays and offensively. I think he's really developing well, and he's still young. Like, I know a lot of people want the next Crosby, McDavid right away, but this takes time. Development takes time for people. Just look at you growing up. I mean, some people hit puberty or like faster than others. That's the same with hockey. Like, some people will develop faster and become better, and sometimes it takes a step back to really evaluate your game and really work on that and retool what you need to do and be that better player. And I think it'd be too soon to give up on him. And like you're right, Mike, I think the forwards, I think Fabry and McGinn probably would have been trade targets, but they're both injured. So I don't think anything would really go on the forwards. I know Ryan Strome has been out there. New Jersey just lost Jack Hughes. He's injured. The extent of that seems like it's pretty significant. So I'm not sure what's going to go on with that. But they can use a second-line center. He sure is their number one. I think Timo Meier is going to probably slot in that 2 spot, but he hasn't really been playing well. I think Ryan Strome would be a good fit with the New Jersey Devils. I think if the Ducks would go that route. I mean, the term for Ryan Strome is a little long. Maybe retaining some salary, which the Ducks I don't think they want to do. But I think he'd be a good fit. And then once Jack Hughes comes back, I think he could slot in that third-line center and be that shutdown center for the third line, just like the Ducks had in 2007 when they had that awesome third line. I think that's something I would see. Like, other than that, though, I don't think he goes anywhere, Mike. I think we're really short down the middle. I don't think we have enough of that beef. And it's not fair to throw the kids that we have that play that natural position into that spot right now when there's other teams that can just run them over. I think Strome has been really well. I played well for the Ducks, and I think he's going to be one of those players that's going to help us get to that next level. Same with Frank the Tank. I know Frank the Tank would have probably got more suitors, but after signing the extension and the way his contract works, I don't think a lot of teams are going to be calling about him. I could be wrong, though. He's been playing well, and he can provide that secondary scoring that a lot of teams want. So overlooking that contract, I know a lot of teams, some of them are kind of wary about that pain after you're done. But like you said, Mike, I can't see a lot of the forwards moving. Maybe Leeson, Lundestrom, but I think the Ducks really like Lundestrom. I like him too. I like you get what you get with him. There's not going to be, like I mentioned before, you're not getting a flashy guy. He's not going to put up a bunch of points. He's going to do everything he's asked to do to a T, if not more. So like I'd be surprised. I think anything with forwards going, I think it's gonna be little San Diego goals moves, little small transactions, minor transactions, things like that. Maybe Leeson because he can be he can probably do some damage in a bottom six role in the playoffs with his game that he can bring. But other than that, I can't see anything going on with the forwards.
Yeah, the only other ones to consider would be Harkins, Johnston, Leeson. I mean, but these are guys like you talked about. They're ones that they probably get picks. The Ducks with the center thing. I mean, if they wanted to move Zegras to center, which they don't, so they kind of keep him out of that realm. But if they move Zegras to center, they wouldn't really need Harkins on the fourth line. You could have Lundestrom down there, and then obviously Strome in the mix. Some things to look at there. Johnston, not been my favorite player of the year. I do like his physicality, but he also takes unnecessary penalties. Though he does stand up for the players on the ice and stuff. That's important. So, I mean, those three guys on the bottom part are maybe ones to watch. Other than that, I just don't see a whole lot of movement, a lot of big moves with the forwards. Like I said, the thing to watch with this team is really what they're going to do with, I think, Gibson and Dumoulin. That's what you're going to have to see. And it may be a big nothing. The Ducks might not do anything, but just make some minor moves like Eddie talked about. There might be some moves down at the AHL with the goals. And they might just do something like that, and they might just hang on to what they got and then kind of wait for the summer. They talked about Verbeek trying to swing for the fences, and we'll kind of talk about that in the last segment here, because we'll talk about other players out there and what the Ducks may go for or whatnot. So we'll dive into that. But let me get to our other sponsor real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap up with like other players that, hey, keep an eye on these players. Maybe they'll get traded, or maybe the Ducks will go for them. But don't forget, we're part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Also, DraftKings is one of our sponsors. It might not feel like it, but spring's around the corner. Know how you can tell. Golfers are hitting the links, and we have some tournaments to talk about. And if you want to do more than just talk, put your money where your mouth is. Get it on the tee to green action with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPNY or text HOPNY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccp.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 and over, age eligibility void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, see dkng.co/audio. So, with that, but yeah, so, I mean, the Ducks, they got to try to make, a big move if they want to go swing for the fences. They did try to go for Marchessault and Stamkos. We saw that in the offseason. Is there anything that they can try and go for a big move for here? We had people ask that. Jome H1222 asked, what player can they go for? The trade deadline. Will they, 226? Should they go after, Marner or Ratinen? Those are some names that have been out there. Dizzy Alday says, will the Ducks try to trade for a top six forward since, some of the top FAs don't want to come here? And that's some of the stuff that we have to look at. Will the Ducks take a swing and a miss at some of these players now? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The Rottinen situation is like the talk of the town. Everybody wants to know, is he going to stay in Carolina? What's going to happen with that? So that's a big one that I look at that they're going to have to try and figure out. I would like the Ducks to take a swing and go after him, but I don't know if it's going to happen. We talked about the goalie situation. I don't know if, you send Gibson over there for him and some other parts. Maybe that's something that could be done. But what are your thoughts, Eddie? I mean, as far as the Ducks trying to hit a home run or go after some big name players, which Elliot Friedman alluded to on one of his last podcasts.
Yeah, those are very good questions too. So thank you for bringing those questions to us. It's gonna be. I don't think there should be a push right now for the Ducks to get a big player like this right now with the trade deadline. I think the offseason would probably work better. With Mikko Rantanen, I don't think he wants to come to a team that doesn't have established superstars. he's struggling right now without McKinnon. I'm not saying McKinnon was just carrying his weight, because Mikko Rantanen's a really, really good player, really physical, strong player. But I think that part of it is regretting not taking the kind of similar contract that McKinnon had, or whatever was going on. I know there's back and forth of he said, and blaming it whatsoever. But I don't think Rantanen will sign with Carolina. I just don't think he's happy there. I think he was blindsided by the trade, so that kind of contributed to the fact that his play kind of diminished. But he just hasn't been a factor, and I think he misses being in Colorado, not just with his teammates, but a team that drafted him, and him just all of a sudden waking up one day and he's not an Avalanche anymore. I wouldn't be surprised, Mike, if he goes to free agency and he goes back to the Avalanche. He just goes back at that 12.6, which I think is a fair deal for him. I think it's a little. I think 11.5, maybe 11.8 would be a great deal for him, and that's fair. But yeah, for the Ducks to get him, I don't think he would come to the Ducks. I just can't see that. And if he does, what you're going to pay 14, maybe 15 million for a player that you're gambling on? Do you really want to just throw all your eggs in one basket, like put all your money on black and hopefully you win? It's just kind of a risk that you don't really want to take. You've seen this player got traded to another team. He's not performing as well. What about if he comes to the Ducks? Ducks don't have that kind of star power that obviously the Avalanche had. Ducks don't have the star power that Carolina has. So you're going to come to a team that's kind of in a fringe rebuild or whatever they're calling it now. I can't see it. Maybe the whole Finnish aspect and him growing up, I'm sure as a Finnish player, he's idolized Teemu Selanne. Maybe there's conversation between him and Selanne about what he can do for the Ducks and the opportunity and what this team is going to do in the future. And maybe he wants to be part of that. He wants to be that kind of key part of start resurrecting this Ducks to become a playoff performing team. Who knows? But it's going to cost. It's not going to be cheap, especially with the state tax over here. I'm looking at if he comes over here, it's going to be a big dollar price, and you're going to have to do a contract similar to what you did with Toronto. And hopefully Timu can work his magic too and get someone like that. I would like him. I think he has a lot of potential. And I think not only McKinnon could carry, I think he can carry his own weight and he can just be a factor. He drives the net. He's big. He's physical. He's strong. He has a wicked shot. His shot's amazing. I think a lot of it was just the blind side of getting traded and his emotions. And it just keeps raining down in Carolina, but I really don't think he signs. Marner's another thing. I don't know. I know the cap's going up. If Toronto makes a pretty good, decent, deep run, I think that they'll try to swing for the fences on Marner, depending on how much it costs. But I think if it's another first-round exit or maybe second-round exit, I think it's kind of things have to change with that core, and I think Marner would be the one to go. The trade deadline, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Obviously, Toronto is at a good spot right now to be a Stanley Cup contending team, so they're going to hold on to him. But it's going to see what it's going to take to get him. I think Verbeek is going to swing again for these big name free agents, but you got to stop and think. Look what New Jersey did 4 years ago. They kind of try to pay for Stanley Cup. Look at Nashville. Nashville is one of the worst teams in the league right now. They try to pay for Stanley Cup. You can't just pay for players to come. You have to get the right players and you have to get the right mold. And I don't want the Ducks to go and swing for a $14, $15 million player and he just puts up like 30 points and it just be a disaster. And then we ended up buying him out and having to pay him for the next 20 years. It's just, you have to really tread carefully, and the scouts really have to do their due diligence and see the mold of what they want from this team. And to sign a player like Rantanen too, you have to see who's going to be the coach of the future and if that coach could fit the mold of what the players you're bringing in. Because if Cronin's not going to be your coach of the future, which we discussed on numerous podcasts, then maybe it's time in the offseason to start bringing in that coach if you're that serious. Ducks are, 8 points away from the playoff spot? Doing a hell of a lot better. That's an improvement, Mike. And maybe next season, they can shoot for that wild card spot. So now, at that time, they have to actually bring in someone that these players can really mold with and you can stick with. If it's going to be Cronin, so be it. Keep him. If the Ducks start off 0-15, keep him. Let these players get used to a coach, but let them get used to one coach and start bouncing things around. But you have to really tread water carefully and going into big name free agents like this, especially Marner or Rantanen, because those are going to be game-changing things. Those will make or break your franchise. It's kind of a gamble. You're putting all your money in one boat, and let's see how it turns out. But I would be careful about that. I mean, I would love to see either one of them on the Ducks having a star like that and see what they can do, but it's still scary though, Mike.
Yeah, I think the question for Toronto and Carolina with Marner and Rantanen is like, hey, you guys are in contending spots. You're going to make, the playoffs and try and make a run. So that's why I don't really see either one of those guys moving. I don't know, like, especially Rantanen, I don't know if, an extension will be signed or whatnot. But it's like you have these guys, you're trying to make a push. Why would you try and trade them away unless someone comes along with some kind of ridiculous deal that Toronto or Carolina are going to fleece some other team with some kind of crazy offer? I just don't see that happening. So I really think that's kind of where we're at. I don't really see that happening. That's why I know when Friedman talks about Verbeek trying to do a big ad, I think more or less that the big ads come in the summertime when there are free agents and things like that, where you can go after players. They haven't signed with anything. You're trying to figure out, what you want to do with your future, like when they had Stamkos and Marchessault and where they wanted to go. That's where I think Verbeek takes the bigger swings. Here, it's a little bit more difficult, especially with the way he is. He in these polls and stuff that the Athletic talked about, that they have certain price values and things like that. So it's like, if you're going to try to, swing for the fences, you're going to have to give something up. And, is Verbeek willing to give up a Gibson, a Zegras, or some other player, a Vertrano or a Terry or something like that for someone like that? I just don't really see it. That's why I don't want to really, I'm not really, I hate to say this, but I'm really not excited for the trade deadline when it comes with the Ducks this year. They didn't do much last year. We saw Henrique and Carrick get sent to Edmonton last year before the deadline. Unfortunately, I just really don't see a lot. And it was funny, we asked people, I put a poll question out there on Facebook and asking people, hey, what do you guys think? And more people were talking about, getting rid of the coach. I asked them, like, hey, who would you want? Who would you get? And they're like, oh, let's get rid of the coach. And I'm like, okay. So even you guys out there kind of think that way. So it just is what it is.
I just looked up, Mike. Apparently you can't trade coaches, so I'm sorry, fans. I had to look that up real quick for you guys. Crony can't be traded, so don't hold your breath on that.
Yeah, exactly. He can't be traded. So what are you going to do? That's where we're at. I did think about Pittsburgh. That was another one that, maybe you look at, Rickard Rakell's having a great season with 28 goals. You had Rust out there with 21 goals. Malkin's been hurt, but he's got 12 goals. There's, we talked about the fire sale there. I mean, there's some stuff to look at there, but I don't know if they would bring back a Rickard Rakell or whatnot, but that's a team I would definitely watch, is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh, yeah. They're in the whole thing, too, Mike. I get their loyalty to Sidney Crosby, and that's really commendable, but, I mean, you have to stop and think. They want to build their team around him. Like he's playing lights out for his age, and he's not aging at all. What his product on the play on the ice, but right now with Rakell, the way he's been playing, he can command a huge return. And I know you're trying to do right by your captain and the person that pretty much saved your franchise, but there comes a time where you have to just cut your losses and really sit down with the player. And I'm sure Crosby wouldn't mind either. I know his competitive side, he wants to be competitive, but I think he's the kind of player that wants to put the Pittsburgh Penguins first than his own competitiveness. And them trying to kind of resurrect their franchise is just crazy. Their goaltending is atrocious. There's no way in hell that goaltending can survive the season, let alone the playoffs. Malkin, I don't think Malkin's going to go anywhere. He has say where he goes, so I think he's staying there. Crosby, obviously. I know a lot of people want him to go to the Avalanche because the ties he has with McKinnon. I think Rakell would be great to get some return back. I know Michael Bunting, I've been wanting him, a player to come to the Ducks. I think he'd be a good asset the way he just gets to the front of the net. He has that gritty style. I think he's a player that Verbeek would want. I mean, obviously, he's not playing that well, but a lot of the Pittsburgh Penguins aren't. Russ is another one that's another gritty player, right winger that can get in there in the goalie's faces and create chaos in front of the net. I do want to bring up Erik Karlsson. He hasn't played well at all. His contract's about $7-8 million for another few more years. I'd say bring in a player like him. Bring in a player like Karlsson, not because he's going to help the Ducks, but hey, we can afford the contract. Maybe it resurrects his career, where he could be the factor that he was playing those top minutes with Lacombe. Imagine Lacombe and Karlsson. Karlsson can even do a third of what he'd done before. Eat the contract, and not just that, we can get assets and retain a lot of draft picks or prospects to eat up all that contract. It's a win for the Ducks. The Pittsburgh Penguins get that defenseman spot open to bring in someone better. They get the cap space to do that, and I think everyone wins. I mean, for us to take a player like Erik Karlsson, we're going to have to get a high-end prospect. We're going to have to get some draft picks. We're going to have to get a roster player because to take that whole contract for them. But that's a trade that I would do, Mike. If he doesn't work out year one, guess what? The Ducks can afford to buy him out because the cap space is going up next year. It's going up the year before or after that too. So Ducks are in a good spot. Like they don't have a lot of contracts where they have to spend and break the bank on. Now, if they want to use that money and go crazy and Black Friday shopping at the free agency, then so be it. But I think that'd be a logical trade for the Ducks to do, just to get a top-end prospect, some high draft picks, and a roster player just to take on a bad contract like Erik Karlsson's.
Yeah, that's one thing I wonder if the Ducks will do, if they will take on any bad contracts. That's something to look at, too, at this trade deadline. Maybe they do. I mean, it might not be that kind of situation, but maybe that's something they do look at. And that's what they kind of Verbeek's been criticized for, because he got Trouba, he got Husso, and those guys were kind of, people, and we've talked about it, that he took on those deals, but then, why didn't you get more in return? I mean, Husso, we still don't even know, because your favorite player, future considerations was involved in that, so we don't even know, what happened with that. We have to kind of figure out, you can't really evaluate it 100% just because we don't know, right? So, there's that, but that's kind of been the thing, is well, hey, what are we doing here with taking on these contracts and not trying to, get more from these other teams? So that's kind of a concern. Hey, let's go for it. You want to take on these contracts and bring in these players, or take help other teams with cap space, Detroit. Okay, but what are we gonna do here? How is this gonna really help us out overall? So it's something to monitor and see if the Ducks do go that way. And one thing I wanted to throw out, this is just kind of I saved this and I didn't tell Eddie, but it's kind of a crazy trade that I wanted to throw out there and see kind of what Eddie thought. But if the Ducks were going to go nuts, and this is nuts, and I highly doubt this will happen, and I'm sure people will blow me up Mike, you are freaking crazy for suggesting this. But what if the Ducks traded Zegras and Gibson to Ottawa for Brady Tkachuk and Ullmark? What about that craziness right there? Think about that. You got Brady Tkachuk, Ullmark, both $8 million cap hits. Zegras 5.7, Gibson at 6.4. So you got 16 versus 12. So the Ducks would take on $4 more million. There could be other parts. Maybe there's prospects and draft picks in there. This is just a crazy trade I thought of. No one told me this or whatever. I'm just thinking way outside the box. If Verbeek really went big and went crazy, I don't think this will happen. But I just wanted to end the show with this because I would do this trade. I would take on Ullmark and Tkachuk any day over Zegras and Gibson. Tkachuk is an all-around player. Would just kill it. I know people would cry about Zegras and lose their mind and probably shoot me for suggesting this. That's cool. But I'm just throwing it out there. It's a crazy-ass trade. I highly doubt it'll happen. But I would entertain it, Eddie. And people are going to call me crazy and nuts. But what would you think about the Ducks doing something crazy like that? You think this is far out there, I'm smoking crack? Or is this something you would entertain? Obviously, there'd have to be other moving parts. It wouldn't just be 2 for 2. There'd be other stuff in there. But I don't know. Today I was thinking about, because people were throwing out all these crazy things. I thought, hey, man, the Ducks really want to go nuts. you know, um, I don't know. Just I'm kind of ending the show with this. It's crazy. I know people are going to comment on it and have some 2 cents, but would you think that's nuts trying to send Zegras and Gibson to one team in general, or would Kachuk and Allmark be a thing, or Forsberg? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
If I'm the Senators GM, I'd be like, hey, shut the fuck up, click. It still wouldn't be worth it for Kachuk. I'm sorry, Gibson. I know Zegras and Gibson have the high. Zegras has a high ceiling, younger. His potential is out there. Gibson, I don't think Gibson would thrive in Ottawa. I think they're kind of similar defensive end on the backside. But Brady Kachuk's a game changer. He's a franchise player you can build a team around. He can carry you on his back, and that kid does it all. He's second in the league in penalty minutes and still puts up goals, assists, hits. He's the epitome of the perfect hockey player. Like if you watch Rocky 3 when they fought the Russian guy and the Russians they created I forgot the name of the Russian guy that Rocky fought that Sylvester Stallone fought. They just created this guy as a perfect human being. I want to say the Kachuk brothers are just like that. I think Brady too. Brady is just the ultimate player you want on your team. I even think that even just Zegras Gibson, it wouldn't even start. You got to throw in a first round pick. You got to throw in. You want to throw in Lacombe, throw in Minty. It's gonna take a lot to get something like that the pride out of their hands, and then yeah, it's just that'd be cool, Mike. And I would take the gamble on that because you know what you're getting with Brady Kachuk. He's gonna come in there and he's gonna just Kachuk them. he's gonna go there and be the definite franchise game changer. I think he's probably one of the better players in the whole entire league. And when you add his physicality into it, it is nonstop. Like it's crazy. I think come Olympics time, I know Canada on paper and skill wise they're better, but when it comes to the U.S. team, they're more physical. And Brady Kachuk is something that I would love to have on the Ducks. I'm probably gonna go play my NHL game and just put him on the Ducks to see him in a Ducks uniform. That's the closest we're ever gonna get. But you never know, Mike. Things can happen. I think right now Ottawa's really content with who they have. Their captain's really doing a good job for them. And he's kind of thresholding him into the playoffs. I hope they make the playoffs. I don't know if I told you, so I mentioned on the show before, but Ottawa's probably my favorite Canadian team. I don't know, when I was a kid, I just liked their logo. So I follow them too. I mean, not like I follow the Avalanche, but I do keep an eye on them. And if they did make the playoffs, I would cheer for them. I would cheer for, too, just to throw it off topic, Mike, I would cheer for the Blue Jackets. I'm really surprised on the 5-game win streak they have and them biting at the playoffs chance. Like I think the Blue Jackets are going to be buyers this trade deadline. They did a really good job, and I think part of it with the Johnny Gaudreau passing, I think a lot of the team is fired up, and it takes something like that to make you want to play that extra hard and win for them. And I don't know if you've seen that movie, Mike, Angels in the Outfield. I think that Johnny Gaudreau is sometimes on the ice helping the Blue Jackets get those W's for his teammates and letting him know that it's okay and he's still there watching over him. And that's another team, Mike, that I would cheer for to win the Stanley Cup is the Blue Jackets because they've gone through hell. I think they've gone through worse than the Ducks as far as their rebuild, and I think it's good to see them chomping on the bits of a playoff spot. But Mike, you are crazy. You're smoking crack. Share it with me next time. But yeah, Brady Kachuk would be a godsend.
Yeah, I know I'm on crack, and I know it's highly unlikely. And yes, you're right. I don't know if Zegras and Gibson would be enough, especially if you're trying to get Olmark in return too. That would be really insanely crazy. You'd have to throw in some other stuff too, for sure, on the Anaheim side. I'm just throwing that out there because, hey, people are talking about crazy big trades. I mean, that's a crazy big trade that the Ducks could maybe do. If they really thought about it. But will it happen? Of course not. I think it's highly unlikely. I just want to throw it out there. But you do mention Columbus, and that's a team that I'm curious with Merzikas in there and net, if they think he's enough or not. If not, maybe they try to go to Gibson and add him in there to try to make that push. So, but again, that's another team to look at. I would look at Columbus. I'd look at Pittsburgh. I'd look at Edmonton, Vancouver. The Knights, Vegas Knights are always in there doing some shim-sham, flim-flam, whatever. Look at Tampa Bay, Florida. Those are teams as well that, you just never know what they're going to do. But I'm really curious. My kind of final thought is I don't see the Ducks doing a whole lot of big stuff. Maybe a few little things here. Unfortunately, I think on Friday we're all going to be sitting there, watching all the stuff go down, and I don't see Anaheim doing anything crazy. If they do, it would be awesome and amazing. I threw out this crazy trade here. We did talk about some stuff maybe with Gibson being moved and Dumoulin, things like that. Those kind of been the two biggest names that have been thrown around, but unfortunately, I really don't see a lot. That's just where I'm at. I'm not super hopeful that the Ducks will do much in the next coming days, but that's kind of where I'll leave it, Eddie. I'll throw it back to you for a final comment and then wrap up the show.
No, it's just thank you guys for following along and listening to. Shout out to the person that called you out too, Mike, that said thank you for the giveaway when we went to the game.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. So shout out to you. Thank you for listening to the show. Yeah, thank you for everyone's support over the last few years. I've been thinking about how long I've been recording the podcast with you, Mike, and it's just so fun to talk hockey with you. It's just sometimes I forget we're recording a podcast and I'm just talking hockey with my best friend. So I just want to throw that out there. Let's not get discouraged about the trade deadline if the Ducks don't do much. We're not anticipating it. I know we said this is going to be an important deadline, but a lot of things change with a lot of moving parts of other teams, and that kind of dictates the kind of flow of what's going on. But I think the Ducks overall this season, I think we can, even though it's been shitty at times, we can hold our heads up high and say that this team is a lot better than they were last season. Some games are more bearable. We've seen the flashes of greatness, and I think this team is on that cusp of being a little more competitive than they were. Maybe we can fight for not a wild card spot, but get pretty damn close next season, or if not that. But this season, let's just take it in stride. Let's just have fun with it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to just shoot them up, hit us up, DM us. We're glad to talk about it on the next show, and looking forward to seeing what goes on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely, and like you said, appreciate that. Yeah, a few different people came up to us the last couple of games and said hi, and appreciate the stuff that we're doing. We appreciate you guys as well, and yeah, we'll have a show after the trade deadline, sometime after that. Kind of recap it and look at that, and then obviously we'll be on the downhill slide of the season and kind of see where the Ducks go. Lots of games in March to kind of figure out, and then by the beginning of April, kind of know where we're at. So again, thanks for the support. And let's go, Ducks.